Hello and welcome to the Women in Motorsport program. I'm Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, and with me we have Ben Schneider from Grid Encore and LastCar.info, as well as Emily Sharp, and we are ready to recap the F1 Academy weekend. As always, a big thank you to our Patreon investors Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Your investment in the Grid Network, no matter the size, plays a crucial role in our mission to promote women in motorsport. You can make a difference by clicking on the link in the video description, or you can always opt to do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chats. $10 by either of those, and we will mail you some fun Grid Network stickers. So be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share our show with family and friends who love motorsports. Now, let us start by talking about the F1 Academy recap. So we entered the weekend with many expecting Abbi Pulling to be the favorite to sweep, as this was Dorian Pin's first race back from injury after she missed out on the 24 Hours of Le Mans. One driver that was perhaps under the radar was Chloe Chambers. Pulling was fastest in practice. She took pole position in races 1 and 2, and she won race 1. However, Chambers denied her the sweep. She qualified in second place in both races, but was able to jump Pulling on the race 2 start and never looked back. She is the first American to win in F1 Academy, and no American won in the W Series era either, so this is a huge accomplishment. Emily, Ben, does Chloe's win demonstrate a potential championship effort and prove that an American car can win on such an international level?
Yeah, Isha, I think you kind of alluded to it. This one kind of came out of nowhere. I went into this weekend truly believing this was going to be Abbi Pulling's time to make a sweep, as you said, of the weekend. And she truly came out of nowhere and not only did an amazing, incredible job by putting herself in P2 after qualifying, but she completely dominated race 2. At one point, I thought she was going to have a 10-second lead over Pulling, who was showing the signs of tire degradation and just unfortunately suffering from that dirty air effect of racing in Barcelona. But back to your original question, I think if anything we've learned from this weekend, that this is not going to be an easy path for Abbi to take the championship. We had so many strong performances amongst the women. And again, all I can use a word to describe Chloe's performance was dominant in race 2. She totally controlled it from start to finish. So I think it's definitely going to be an indicator that she is going to fight for this championship, and it is not Abbi's to run away with.
Yeah, I think that Pulling should definitely still be considered the title favorite. She does have a pretty big lead. She's never finished lower than second in a race this season. But in terms of trying to win out, I think obviously Dorian Penn is still coming back from her injury. You look at what Chloe Chambers did this weekend. And Isha, to your point as well about an American being able to win on an international level here. We've seen what's going on with Logan Sargent at Williams. I think he's been done no favors by the team this year in many respects, but it's been a rough go for him. And he was the first full-time American to race in Formula One in 16 years. I know Alexander Rossi did his 5 races, but in terms of having a full-time driver, we had to wait pretty much a generation to see that. I know this is the Women in Motorsport show, but I do want to highlight quickly Jack Crawford also took the win in the feature race in Formula 2 this weekend. So great weekend for young American drivers with Chloe Chambers in F1 Academy, Jack Crawford over in F2. And I think that that is going to give American fans some hope that we do have some strong young development drivers on the road to F1 ladder. And hopefully we won't have to wait 16 years this time, whether it's Jack Crawford or Chloe Chambers or anybody else. To find an American full-time Formula One again. Of course, we all expect Logan Sargent probably coming over here to IndyCar next year. We'll just have to wait and see. But as for Chloe Chambers, dominant race 2, like you mentioned, Emily, and I think, like you said, previewing the competition that we could see throughout the rest of the season. Still think Pulling's the title favorite, but we could see Chambers dominate with another race win or two, or maybe somebody else will get up there and stand on the top step of the podium as well.
Yes, definitely. And Chloe Chambers' dominance so far has tied her for second place in the F1 Academy standings with Dorian Penn. 2 years ago, she was overshadowed by her Jenner Racing teammate Jamie Chadwick in the W Series. Chambers scored only 1 point and was 16th in the final driver's standings. So, Ben, starting with you, does this build a new image for Chloe Chambers for sponsors and teams as a driver to be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. And, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. When she was in the W Series in 22, teamed with Jamie Chadwick, obviously Chadwick was dominating the series, running away with pretty much every race. We were talking here on this network discussing maybe she could sweep the entire season, and then ultimately she came up short in a couple races, and then the entire season and entire series came to an end, unfortunately. But she certainly had a very strong teammate, dominant teammate in Jamie Chadwick, so that's a very high bar for her to be up against. But she did not have the success that I think she was hoping for in that W Series effort a couple of years ago. So to be able to go out here and just the marketing aspect of it as well. I know that this isn't a Haas factory built car like their Formula One cars are. But it is still cool for everybody at the Haas team to have one of their young development drivers and all the Americans that are a part of that effort to hear their anthem on the podium, as well as Chloe Chambers, obviously being a young American driver. It's a great victory for her and for the entire Haas team. And I think it's going to go a long way in building that effort, like you mentioned, Isha, to give her a new image and show that she's a top prospect in F1 Academy here this year.
Yeah, and I'd like to go back to another one of your points that you had just made, Ben, bringing up the Logan Sargent of it all, part of this Formula One conversation. Some would argue that his presence was kind of rushed from F2 to be on the F1 stage, and that potentially is due to his marketability for an American audience to stand behind him. And so naturally, as you have been mentioning, a prominent American driver who is having a successful outing, like Chloe had this past weekend, that could be incredibly marketable. But to your point, it's not a Haas factory machine, but it has that Haas iconic logo on the side of it. So unlike her male cohorts in F1, she is finding success, and this could something be very exciting for Haas to want to continue to back and be trying to bring in sponsors, because she is having an successful outing. So I definitely think that if she continues to put in performances that she has like this past weekend, I don't think this only weekend is going to lead her to have incredibly dominant sponsor opportunities. But if she has a consistent season, I do think that this is someone that sponsors will want to gravitate towards and back.
Yes, definitely. And while Chambers and Pin are set to fight for second place in F1 Academy, the championship is still technically mathematically in reach. However, the next race in Zandvoort is the halfway point race, and if Pulling wins, she can start to mathematically eliminate drivers from the championship contention. So, Emily, with a 66-point lead entering the halfway point, do Pulling and other drivers change their approach to the weekend?
Well, I do think Abby has a really great head on her shoulders. She did do an interview ahead of race two, I believe, and she had mentioned that this is just another outing for her. She's going to approach this as just another job to get done. She's not really thinking about the championship fight, but naturally, as a competitor, it's certainly something that has to be somewhat in the back parts of her brain. I do think as she continues to go out there and prioritize just nailing a qualifying, nailing a race one. To Ben's point, I do think she is still the front runner of this championship race. But again, I don't think her competitors are going to make it easy for her. So I think, next weekend, she is going to be racing at a track that is very notorious for their sweeping curves and overtaking opportunities. So she's going to have her wits among her. But I do think that her approach should relatively stay the same. I think, unfortunately, biggest takeaway for her, she needs to attack that start a little bit more, because that's really what set Chloe up to have that opportunity to run away with her with a near 7-second gap between herself and Abbi Pulling. But I think she has the right approach moving forward. Now, if she continues to struggle into next weekend, probably a different conversation we're going to have on this show.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen, because if you look at her results, 4 wins and her 2 non-wins are second place finishes. I mean, she's almost doing about as well as you could possibly do. So, I mean, I don't think she should change whatever she's doing here, because clearly whatever it is working. I think her approach has been very, very strong. And, I think it's kind of ironic. I think everybody, and I certainly remember one of our regular viewers in the chat room just insisting to me that Dorian Penn was going to just dominate the entire year. It wasn't going to be close. She was going to win every race by 30 seconds and just be on a totally another level. And in Jeddah, I think we were starting to see that. She dominated race 1, obviously. I think should have won race 2. I still think that penalty was entirely too harsh. But Abbi Pulling turned it around, took that momentum from the race 2 victory that she inherited, swept the Miami weekend. Obviously, Doriane had the injury and has been coming back from that. But even still, 7th and 5th this weekend, I think, is a strong result for her. So we'll see, if she can rebound and, if she can sweep Zandvoort and then continue to rack off a couple of wins, then maybe she can claw her way back into this championship fight. I think maybe their approach, Doriane's and Chloe's and maybe some drivers below in the standings who maybe aren't mathematically eliminated, but for all intents and purposes, we take a miracle at this point, even though we're not even officially halfway through the season. Pulling's just been so strong. I think the last driver that needs to change her approach right now is the one that is, 66 points ahead of the field.
Yep, definitely. And now, if we take a look at some of the other drivers, here's an interesting fact. All the full time drivers in F1 Academy have scored points this season. Emily DeHughes scored her first points in both races in Barcelona. Leah Block has 3 consecutive top 10 finishes, including a career best 6th in the second Barcelona race. Hamda Al Khabaisi's streak of points in every race continues, and she got her first podium in race 2. Now, these drivers are on the rise. However, we also have drivers who are sliding down. That includes Maya Woog, who scored no points this weekend and fell from 3rd to 7th in the standings. Carrie Schreiner picked up 2-point finishes in Jeddah, but only has one 9th-place finish since. And Aurelia Nobles has failed to score points since the first Jeddah race, where she finished 7th. So, Ben, starting with you, do you believe any drivers going on a slide will be able to rebound in Zandvoort?
I'd keep an eye on Maya Vug. I think that she had a very rough weekend, obviously retiring in the first race, only 13th in the second, so picking up 0 points. As you alluded to, Isha, she had a very strong outing in Saudi Arabia, picking up 2 podium finishes, crossing the line 3rd each time, and then inheriting 2nd with Dorian Penn's penalty. And it kind of looked like it was going to be Penn pulling Vug all the way throughout the year with how strong they were in each of those races. But Maya's unfortunately slipped back a little bit. But I don't imagine that it's going to be a repeat of this past race weekend where she doesn't score points in either race. I think she's at least going to come away with a strong haul, and she can probably regain a couple of those spots that she lost this past weekend.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ben. I think this was just an unfortunate weekend for Maya and factors that were completely out of her control. She got tangled up in that race 1 contact incident and then dealt that penalty that put her at the back of the grid for race 2. So a frustrating weekend, I think not reflective of her talent and abilities and the machine that she has to drive. So yeah, I do not count her out. I think she is still very within reach to turn this one weekend around and have overall a good championship outing. I do also want to mention this was Lola Lovenfoss is returned from her injury as well. She had a strong outing, in addition to Dorian, who, yes, she's back in her car from her injury. And looking at her finishes, for those who are not familiar and didn't maybe catch the entire race, would not necessarily catch on to how well she did of bringing herself up through the pack from 2nd to, I believe she finished in 5th place overall. So she looked very strong. So she's coming back from an injury as well. So I also expect her to come be on the up and up for next weekend and continue to feel more comfortable and confident in her abilities as she recovers.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but was she the one that stalled on the start for?
Yes.
Yeah. So to come back from that as well and to come away with a strong 7th place points finish, I think, again, and to do it on healing broken ribs. I mean, those are absolutely no joke. So, I mean, don't let the poor results in comparison to what she was doing before the injury dictate how her weekend went. I think all things considered, just the fact that she was back in the car this weekend is a victory for her, and to be level on 2nd in the standings here with Chloe Chambers now after this weekend and to salvage what she did, I think a very strong job. Well done.
Yes, definitely. That is certainly something to celebrate. Now, one driver that I'm curious to hear both of your thoughts on is Bianca Bustamante. Last year, she scored 2 wins in F1 Academy and landed support from McLaren, which was huge. This year, she finished on the podium in Miami race 2 and has at least finished in the points all season. So, Emily, after we saw what happened with McLaren and their IndyCar team last week, do you believe that any pressure to perform might continue to build if she only maintains point finishes instead of winning races?
I think absolutely. I think, to be clear, I think a lot of the pressure comes from herself. I think she obviously, I'm not sitting in the cockpit with her, like, I don't know what her inner thoughts are, but that false start on race 2, like, I just got the sense that she felt frustrated about where she had placed and felt like she had a better vehicle than her competitors and that she took aggressive measures to put herself where she needed to be. So with all that being said, yes, the IndyCar news with bringing in Nolan Siegel was very shocking, and my initial reaction to hearing that was like, "Oh, we might have another Red Bull Racing team in terms of making aggressive decisions to make sure that they have the best talent amongst their school of potential drivers." So I think she is fully aware of the opportunity that she has by driving that McLaren F4 car, and she has a following of fans, and so I think she's really trying to, optimize those factors, and having her name attached to that uh, car brand, it's an incredible opportunity, to be quite frank. So I think she is going to continue to put pressure on herself, but to your point originally, Isha, I think, the team behind her is also going to make it very well known that the results are expected uh, for her to continue to be able to drive that iconic papaya orange vehicle.
Yeah, I came into this show thinking about how I was going to answer this question and thinking to myself, well, this is really an Aero McLaren thing, right? But then I remembered Oscar Piastri is a McLaren F1 driver. He had the whole deal with Alpine thinking that he was going to be driving one of their cars going into 2023. They put out that press release. He said, this is completely wrong. I'm not going to be driving for them next year. And then right away, McLaren comes out and the mad lad Zach Brown pulled his magic again, and he landed Oscar Piastri here too. So I don't know if it's a Zach Brown thing. I don't know, if it's widespread all throughout McLaren here, how ruthless they are on level with Red Bull, like you were mentioning, Emily. We're getting those rumors again that they might be interested in another midseason swap in the RB team with Liam Lawson and Daniel Ricciardo maybe swapping places. So who knows what's going to happen there? But I think absolutely, driving for an iconic brand, an iconic color like the McLaren Papaya Orange, like you were mentioning, Emily, that's enough pressure in and of itself. But then you look at what's going on with the Aero McLaren IndyCar team. I think that, it further proves that, what we've seen all throughout motorsports for the last several years and in many different instances, not just with McLaren, not just with Red Bull, but, frequently it's proven that contracts are hardly even worth the paper they're printed on in many respects. And sometimes that comes back to bite drivers that think they might have future secured, and they really don't. They have to go out and continue to prove their worth every single weekend here. And especially in a series like F1 Academy, where that's the whole objective for these drivers, is to prove that they are worthy of taking that next step. I imagine there's got to be an incredible amount of pressure on not just Bianca Bustamante, but everybody in this field.
Yes, that's very true. Now, going back to the top of the standings, Abbi Pulling has 147 points, and her worst finish is second twice. All four races are wins. Now, she seems destined for the championship unless she experiences a second half collapse, and another driver goes on a big run of wins and podiums. Now, Ben, is it too early for her to put one hand on the championship and start looking at 2025 plans, since we know that the champion will not be able to return the next year?
Ask me after Zandvoort. I think we need to see how Zandvoort goes. If she sweeps the weekend, then I think you're at that point where you can say she's got one hand on the title, and it's going to take an epic collapse where she DNFs 4 of the last 6 races or something crazy like that. And Dorian Penn or Chloe Chambers or whoever establishes themselves as the number 2 after that weekend goes out and sweeps the rest of the year. I think that's what it's going to take if Pulling goes out and does what she's been doing to start the season, finishing either first or second in every race. I think if she does that, then she's set herself up as a clear favorite, and we can say she's got one hand on the championship. But if she has an off weekend and Pin sweeps the weekend, or Chambers does, or somebody else, who knows? Maybe that throws an entire wild card into this championship fight that we hadn't considered before. I mean, she could still lose up to 50 points, I guess, or maybe a couple more even. I guess you get the point for fastest lap and whatnot. So, you think about it, 66 minus 50. It could be a whole new championship fight. We know she's leaving Zandvoort with a points lead, but after that, it's anybody's guess if she doesn't go out and perform like we expect her to. But I imagine that if it's not a top 2 finish, we can at least expect her to be on the podium or close to it with how she's run so far this year.
I totally agree with you, Ben, and I really appreciate you going, like, anything can happen, but I do think that Abby just has that dominance that heading into next weekend, and I do think that she is our front runner for the championship, but I will say I don't think even if we are all watching going like championship's hers, like she's moving on, she's looking to next year to what opportunities may await her. I don't think that she will lessen any type of aggression to wanting to do well for her own personal gains. Like she has, we as we've talked about on the show, she continues to race in the British F4 Championship, so she is continuing to any opportunity she can to better herself as a competitive open wheel driver, she's taking it. And she is truly just an athlete. So while we might watch next weekend and see her sail away into championship victory lane for the end of the season, I do think we can count on her to keep her head down throughout the entirety of this F1 Academy season and really put in weekend after weekend of excellent driving, which is what I think we can expect out of her from here on out.
Yep, and speaking of the rest of the F1 Academy season, we will be returning to the track at Zandvoort on August 24th and 25th, and Abby Pulling will definitely want to further establish herself as the championship favorite. Now, that's all for today's recap of F1 Academy. Make sure to subscribe to Grid Network to follow along with all of our updates across the Motorsport series. Taking a look at our upcoming schedule, Grid Network will have trackside coverage of the ABB Formula E Series Portland E-Prix weekend. Joe Samaniego and Nicole Fry from Fans in Focus are at Portland International Raceway. They will bring video updates throughout the weekend as Portland hosts a doubleheader. Now, please continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. Now support us as we are on the road to 2,000. Hit the bell icon to get notifications for when we go on air, and follow us on all of our social media platforms, and go visit our website, gridnetworktv.com. Take 5 minutes to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Once we hit $500 per month, we can start sending our team to the track to cover more races and continue expanding our coverage. The link to all of that is in the video description. If you would rather make a one-time donation, click on the Buy Me a Coffee link, get your name on the board, and invest as much as you want. Consider to buy coffee for a specific on-air personality, and they will thank you on the air. Now that's all for today's show. For Emily and Ben, I am Isha. Thank you for watching and enjoy the races.